Egypt's embattled government is now warning of a military crackdown as mass protests continue against the rule of President Hosni Mubarak. A day after the biggest rallies yet, calling for Mubarak to stand down, demonstrators have marched on Egypt's parliament as unrest spreads across the nation. Claims have also emerged that hundreds of anti-government protesters have been secretly detained and tortured by the army. ABC correspondent Mark Willacy has been in Cairo watching events, and I spoke to him a short time ago. Mark Willacy, what's the latest there? Is the protest movement growing or is it starting to lose some momentum?
It's definitely not losing any momentum. We have fluctuating numbers inside the square, but every day about this time when the Cairo starts to wake up and get moving, people start flooding into the square. They line up for hundreds of metres down the street. So it's not losing momentum, and we could actually see an escalation tomorrow when we're being told the protesters say they plan to march on the presidential palace and they also plan to march on state TV. I was at the state TV building just a couple of days ago and I can tell you there is literally a ring of steel around it. There are dozens of tanks and armoured personnel carriers around that building. There are hundreds of troops, including troops that I saw carrying sniper rifles. So the big fear from the government is that if these protesters move to the state TV building, that they could try and take it over, and that would be seen as a coup by the government, so they've got it very heavily protected. So tomorrow we could see a major escalation.
And how long can you see all of this going on for? Has something got to give?
Something does have to give, because the protesters are saying they are going nowhere. So what has to happen, or what will happen, are a number of scenarios, potential scenarios. One, you could see the protesters just say, look, we had a go, we didn't get there, and they just evaporate from the square. I don't think that's going to happen. The second scenario is that we could see Hosni Mubarak say, look, OK, I have to go. He may say, look, I'm going to go to Germany for medical treatment, which he's been doing in the past months, and he just not come back. That's also unlikely. The other scenario we could see is that the military moves in. And we've heard from the Foreign Minister, Ahmed Aboul Gheit, overnight that he believes the military will have to intervene if this situation becomes more chaotic. That's the word he was using, chaos. If chaos spreads, the military will have to move in. So if that happens, there are men, women and children in this square. That could be very messy indeed.
And do you get a sense that people are starting to worry about their safety and their livelihoods?
No, in fact, people are saying, look, really, under this corrupt and despotic regime, we don't have a livelihood anyway. This is betting all or nothing. They've decided that this is the one time they can topple the Mubarak regime and get in a democratic government, something that reflects their wishes. And they're also saying that, look, if we back down and say that's the end of the protest, there's going to be repercussions. This is a regime that has no hesitation in dragging people off the street in the middle of the night or busting into their front door and taking them into secret police locations and beating them and torturing them. And these protesters say, look, if we give up, that's going to happen to us. So we're going to put it all on the line here. We really need to push Mubarak out, because if we don't, we're going to suffer the consequences.
Now, the Vice President, Omar Suleiman, is reported as having said that Egypt is not ready for democracy. How did that go down with the crowds?
Well, it didn't go down very well at all. The Egyptians are saying, we are ready for democracy, but it's you and your regime that's not ready for democracy. You're the ones that could really pave the way for democracy by resigning en masse and having free and fair elections. Vice President Suleiman also said that these protesters, by calling for President Mubarak to go, are insulting Egypt. So it would seem that the regime is very hardline. It's not going to shift its position. It would seem that Hosni Mubarak, on the face of it, is going to stay until September, until those elections he promised are held, and then he will go, he will retire. But the protesters are saying that's not good enough. You've got to go now, and if you don't, there's going to be big trouble.
So as we wait to see what happens tomorrow, what role have the police and the military been playing at this point?
Well, the police have been playing a very interesting role. They're obviously in Mubarak's pocket, and we've seen allegations of police dragging thousands of people off the streets and out of their homes and taking them to special facilities, facilities Egyptians know all too well about, where they've been beaten. Some say they've been tortured. There's been allegations of people being pistol whipped, being whipped by rubber hoses, having hot oil poured on them, being burnt by cigarettes. Tried and true methods used by the Egyptian security forces and by the intelligence agencies here for decades. The military, though, until now has been seen as neutral. They've said, look, we will not open fire or have any violence towards Egyptian people. Obviously, there's pressure on the military to change that if the protests grow. But there are now allegations coming out today that the military could also been involved in torture of Egyptians who are involved in these protests. So it would seem that the security forces, both the police and the military, may have some serious allegations against them when it comes to torture.
Mark Willacy, I'm sure you had a lot of work to do. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Heather.